So everyone knows that Tenpai got hit on the most recent ban list. Chundra went from 3 copies to 1 copy, and Sangen Summoning went from 2 copies to 1 copy. And if you think that these hits have made Tenpai unplayable and dead and into a deck that you don't have to worry about facing on the ladder anymore, I've got some bad news for you. That's not going to be the case. Tenpai is still right now a completely functional deck. In fact, I would argue that Tenpai is probably one of the better decks in Master Duel still, and partially due to some new card releases, which we'll go into later. But this, you could argue, I could see Tenpai still being a tier 1 deck, even with 1 Chundra and 1 Sangen Summoning. And don't take this from me. I am not a Tenpai fanboy at all. Okay, if it were up to me, the less Tenpai I play against, the better. Okay, I do not enjoy the games I play against Tenpai. Okay, but I just gotta be real with you. Okay, I don't see in this meta right now. I cannot see Tenpai falling that much further than it was before. It may not be the best deck in the format. Probably not, but the fact that you can still possibly see this as tier 1. Yeah. Well, first let's get into, the hits. So what has the hits to Sangen Summoning and Chundra done? You've lost 2 starters from the Chundra and 1 starter from Sangen Summoning. So this deck has lost 3 starters. And if you go by the number of starters now, typically the deck ran, if you just take out these cards, you would have 1, 2, 3, 2 Genroku, so 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, and then Bestial Magnemite, I guess you could count as a starter against some decks if you like open a Veiler or light or dark hand trap, or your opponent's playing any light or dark monsters, then Bestial Magnemite also becomes a pseudo starter. So that's like 12 starters ish. So the deck kind of went from 15 starters to 12 starters, and 12 starters post Banlist is obviously not, in my opinion, it's not consistent enough for a blind second deck, especially since you're going to have to play into your opponent's disruptions a lot. So the key to playing Tenpai post Banlist is to make up for the consistency lost from the limiting of Chundra and Sangen Summoning. Now, why I think Tenpai is still going to be good is because there are plenty of viable alternatives to make up for the consistency lost. Now, the very obvious way is just run more copies of Genroku and Dora. You lost a few copies of starters, just add in more copies of starters forehead, like pretty simple, right? That's not a perfect solution because Genroku and Dora are not Chundra. These are normal summons, they're not extenders, so if you open multiple of these with Hydra, it tends to not be the best, and obviously, if your normal summon gets stopped, having extra copies of Genroku and Dora in your hand, unlike Chundra, does not do you anything. So instead, if as you can see in my deck, I've opted for a different route to add a consistency, which is the Blaster plus Gold Sarcophagus package. And this is generally the most popular way people have been trying to make up for the consistency lost, because Gold Sarc essentially turns into a Rhoda for any fire dragon, as long as you banish Blaster. So this means that the 2 copies of the Gold Sarcophagus can essentially just be 2 extra copies of Chundra. Except they also don't have to be Chundra. They could be any of these fire dragons you want. They could be a Hydra if you don't already have it. You can go Sark and then use it as a tutor for Genroku, and then special summon Genroku, just like you would Kaiman. Like, these are basically non-quick play versions of Sangen Kaiman. That's Sangen Kaiman is already the best card in the deck. So, yeah, the only issue with this is that Blaster, if you draw a Blaster, your Gold Sarks are dead. But honestly, what are the chances of you drawing the 2 of Gold Sark plus the 1 of Blaster together, right? Like, if you draw the Blaster but without the Gold Sark, the Blaster isn't as bad as some other bricks, because Blaster does have an effect with other fire dragons. You can discard a card to pop a card. You can also just special summon this. This is a level 7 fire dragon, which is a perfect level for you to make your level 10 synchros, such as your Trident Dragon and your Transcendent Dragon. And you can banish just You can like banish the Ash and just banish any other dragon, and then you can special summon it. It's only really bad if you draw a Blaster plus the Gold Strike together, obviously. But this is the highest. I think this is the replacement, the engine for the Chundras and the Sangen Summoning that has the highest potential, the highest ceiling. Because obviously, resolving Gold Strike for Blaster and just having extra copies of basically Rhoda in your deck is the strongest option you can have. If, albeit, it does add 1 brick into your deck. So the other options are do not run Master Dragon. I'm here as a PSA. Please do not run Master Dragon unless I don't know, you're trolling or something. But like, this is not, don't run this. We're not that desperate yet. This card though, this card's very funny. Now this card is terrible in Tenpai Mirror Match. So if you don't, just don't go first in the Mirror Match forehead. But essentially, what this is this is like this is like Pot of Prosperity for the player going second. The turn you activate this card, activate cards from the top of your deck up to the. Or wait, the turn you. Sorry. Reading. I know Yu-Gi-Oh player reading up. Let's go over this again. My bad. Okay. During the main phase, the turn player can activate this effect. Okay. Activate cards from the top of your deck up to the number of cards your opponent controls, and if you do, add 1 of them to your hand. Also, after that, place any remaining cards and 1 card from your hand on the bottom of the deck in any order. So it's basically, if your opponent has a board at all, which you are going, this is a blind second deck, so your opponent is going to have a board a lot of the time. You're going to be able to essentially Pot of Prosperity while putting 1 card from your hand back to the bottom of the deck, which sometimes that's not even bad. Sometimes you can put like Fadras or Genrokus or Blasters back on your bottom of your deck. That's not the biggest deal, but yeah, essentially a prosperity replacement. And during the end phase, if any turn player activated 9 or more cards at once by this card's effect, that player can activate this effect of all cards your opponent controls and enter the graveyard to the deck. That's very funny. And I'm sure that will come up. That's not the end phase effect is not really why you play this card, obviously, but the fact that it has, if you fail to OTK your opponent, you can still mess with you can still wipe your opponent's entire field, essentially, if their opponent has 9 or more cards. Although at that point, if your opponent has 9 or more cards that they control after their turn 1, you're probably not resolving this card anyways. But yeah, this is a prosperity for going second, which is very nice. Now, unfortunately, this is a legacy pack card, and for those of us not fortunate enough to pull this, you're gonna have to craft this. So maybe that's up to you or not. I can see if you're a Brandon player, you probably already have Gold Sarks. So that's why this is I went with the Gold Sark plus Blaster engine. But this essentially gives you 2 additional starters, so that your starter count goes up to like 14 or 14, 15-ish. And honestly, the fact that they didn't hit Sangen Kaiban is probably one of the biggest contributing factors to why I think this deck is still going to be very good. Because Sangen Kaiban is low-key the best card in this deck. It's not Sangen Summoning. Okay, Sangen Summoning does, make your cards unaffected or whatever, but that's just for the main phase. And, is vulnerable to additional hand traps besides just Ash, like stuff like Ogre, and you have to discard and so on. And it's vulnerable to removal. Sangen Kaiban is not vulnerable to removal. Your opponent can't MST the Kaiban to make its effect fizzle or anything. This is just an E-Telly, and the fact that you can E-Telly this in the battle phase means that you get to dodge a lot of shit. Like, there's a lot of stuff this meta are main phase only. Stuff like Valor, stuff like Unchained Soul of Rage, IP Masquerena, very commonly played cards. Sangen Summoning allowing you to do all your stuff in the battle phase basically means you get to avoid all of those forms of disruptions. And then you get to summon a Dragon Monster, and the Dragon Monster can additionally dodge even more disruptions, because now if we're in the battle phase, everything has a quick effect synchro summon. So even if they have additional stuff like Valor or like Imperms or something, or Ogre or stuff that they can use in the battle phase, you can just dodge all of them anyways. That's just, like, this, as long as Sangen Kaiban is at 3, I think this deck always has potential, because this is the card that you never want your opponent to see. When your opponent enters battle phase, activates Kaiban, that is the worst feeling in the world. That's like so much worse than when your opponent activates Sangen Summoning in the main phase 1, in my opinion. So Yeah, let's go over another reason why Tenpai is going to be good this format. We got the Mulcharmies. And yeah, we got a copy of Maxi, and then we have even more copies of Maxi, although admittedly Perulia is a bit weaker than Fuelos. And the thing with these cards is that these cards are the absolute best in Tenpai. In any other deck that's not Tenpai, these cards are dead cards half the time because you have to control no cards. So if you're going first and you make any play at all, then these cards immediately become like dead cards. In Tenpai, because you're going second all the time, these cards are never dead. So there's no downside to running Fuelos. The downside of this being a bad card when you control cards is never going to come up because you're always going to go second. Unless you're playing the mirror match, obviously, excluding the mirror match, these cards are always going to be live, and because they're so much better in Tenpai than in other decks, I think Tenpai should at least run the Fuelos. You can potentially even run Perulia. That's another thing. If you don't want to run extra consistency engines, like if you don't want to run the Blaster or the Code Zark, you know what you can do? You can run 3 Mulcharmy Perulia instead, and that still makes up for your consistency because this draws cards, right? Like it literally just draws cards. So in a way, this is consistency as well, except it's also pseudo maxing your opponent. And yeah, this is absolutely aggravating to play through because your Tenpai is a deck that obviously has room for a ton of non-engine. So it's not like you're just playing against Mulcharmies and Maxis yourself. You know, this deck can run up to 9 copies of Maxi with very little downside. And on top of that, it still has, 9 more hand traps in the deck. Like, this deck can easily run 18 plus hand traps in the deck. And then, forbidden droplets, by the way. If you try to play into your Mulcharmies, your opponent is going to draw into droplets. And then they're going to end your life. So, you can't, there is no taking the Mulcharmy plus the Maxi challenge. By the way, if you ever do take the Mulcharmy or the Maxi challenge, you can draw into additional copies of Maxi or the other Mulcharmies, and then you get to draw even more cards after your Mulcharmies drew you into even more cards that draw from your opponent's special summon. Yeah, this is like the fact that Tenpai is so much better at playing these cards than every other deck. It's like, in my opinion, is a huge reason why I think Tenpai is still going to be arguably a tier 1 meta threat, and this deck is not going away. This deck will probably see a decrease in play from last format, obviously. Like last format, it was 20% of the meta, like every 5th deck you play was Tenpai. Maybe there'll be a decrease in the play rate a bit from there, but don't be surprised if this is still one of the top 3 most played decks in the format. And yeah, if you want to go over the sample deck list, so again, the main engine is like the Pydras, the Genrokus, the Fadra, the Chundra, the Sangen Summoning, the 3 Kaiman. These are all mandatory, and then there's like the 3 slots I use for Blaster and Goatsark. These could be additional copies of Genroku or Dora if you don't want to run the Blaster or Goatsark, or you could run Perulias in these slots instead, because Perulias is technically still a pseudo consistent piece. But yeah. Besides that, then you have room for all of his non-engine. How much non-engine? Let's count. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. So 21 non-engine still, plus Fuelos. So 24 non-engine in this deck still. 24 non-engine. 24 non-engine with 7 board breakers and 17 hand traps. Man, what a deck! This deck still can do that, and yeah, obviously you can just run as many hand traps as you want, and I recommend 3 of your hand traps to be Fuelos, and could be this as well, but yeah, the 3 Fuelos, the Effect Veilers, Ghost Ogre, Bell. It could be Crow as well. Just Bell for again random call by the grave too, because Chundra is at 1, so if your Chundra gets called by it or crowed, it hurts a bit more. But also Crow is a decent option as well. But yeah, the deck runs tons of non-engine, and the fact that we got one of the better non-engines released in this new pack. It's definitely a Tenpai buff. And then the extra deck is the same as normal. Like it's, do I really need to mention like the extra deck? We have Black Rose, Meteor Burst, Kui Belt, Samurai Destroyer for the U-Belt matchup, double Bident Blast, Trident, Ruddy Rose, Transcendent, Typhon, Striker, Seal, Hita, SP, Promethean. Like this is extra deck is unchanged from last format, and main deck, while Tenpai lost a little bit of consistency in the Chundra and Sangen Summoning, there are ways to make up for that, and it gained the Mulcharmies. So yeah, what do you guys, how do you guys think Tenpai is going to do this format? Do you guys think it's going to be tier 1 like I think it is? Do you guys think it's going to fall off, which I've like written to a rogue deck, which I highly doubt it will, but I'm not going to complain if it does or anything. And here's where I would normally ask if you'd be interested in watching me play this deck on the ladder, but let's be honest here. I think we all know the answer to that question. I think people have probably gone through enough games of Tenpai to last one lifetime. So, yeah, just keep in mind that it's probably not going to end anytime soon.